The mountain air hit me like a forgotten song, crisp, pine-laced, and just quiet enough to stir old memories. After 8 grueling months overseas, the only thing I craved was stillness. Not a handshake, not a party, just peace. The kind of peace that only my grandfather's secluded cabin ever gave me. It sat nestled just beyond the manicured gates of Silver Pines, a luxury community with an overzealous HOA and a reputation for perfection. But my grandfather's land, carved out long before any HOA bylaws were printed, sat untouched by their authority. At least, it used to. As I turned up the winding gravel road, something felt off. The familiar welcome sign, hand-carved, aged by decades of mountain wind, was missing. So was the chain-link gate that used to keep out wandering hikers and nosy neighbors. I slowed to a stop. Ranger, my German shepherd, tensed in the passenger seat. "What do you think, bud?" I asked, half expecting an answer. He gave a low whine and stared through the windshield. The gate wasn't just gone. It had been ripped from its post. My pulse quickened. I stepped out, boots crunching against gravel, and scanned the porch. Fresh footprints, a lawn chair that wasn't mine. An unfamiliar bicycle leaned against the railing. "Stay," I told Ranger, though we both knew he wouldn't. The front door, once secured with a thick deadbolt and a wooden brace, hung slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first, lavender-scented air freshener. Not unpleasant, but distinctly not mine. Then I saw it. The living room was transformed. My grandfather's antique rocking chair had been moved. The old oil painting that hung above the fireplace was replaced by a generic beach print. The family photos gone. A pink suitcase rested near the hearth. A yoga mat was unrolled in the center of the room, and then footsteps. A woman emerged from the hallway wearing a bathrobe. She stopped cold when she saw me. She wasn't shocked. She was terrified. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Wrong question," I replied, stepping forward. "This is my house. Who are you?" She backed away, fumbling for her phone. "I'm calling Karen. She said this place was mine for 6 months." "Karen who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Karen Whitmore, president of the Silver Pines HOA, the same woman who'd spent the last 2 years trying to absorb my grandfather's land into a little empire of restrictions and fines. The same woman I beat in court 6 months before deployment." I clenched my fists. "This cabin isn't part of your HOA. You're trespassing." The woman didn't wait for an argument. She dialed her phone with shaking hands and ran outside. Within 15 minutes, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up the drive. And right behind it, like clockwork, came a silver Lexus, the HOA chariot itself. Karen stepped out, all polyester slacks, and practiced outrage. "I told you this would happen," she said to the deputies, nodding toward me. "This man broke into Melissa's rental. She's been leasing this cabin through our community housing program." I blinked. "You're what?" She smiled tightly. "This property falls under the HOA's Extension Ordinance Section 14B. Melissa signed a lease. You have no legal right to enter without notice." I pulled a folder from my truck and handed it to the deputy. "Title deed, dated 1972, private land, not part of Silver Pines, court ruling included." The deputy, a tall, soft-spoken man with reading glasses, examined the papers. Karen crossed her arms, still smug. "Melissa has mail addressed here. She said she's been living here for weeks. You can't just throw her out." "I didn't invite her in," I replied. "That makes her a squatter." The deputy looked up. "This deed is clean. Property is private. Karen, your friend, is here illegally." For the first time, Karen's smile slipped. Melissa's face went pale. "You said it was fine. You said the owner abandoned it." Karen ignored her. "Well, I'll have our legal team sort this out. Until then, I suggest you both vacate the property to avoid further escalation." Ranger growled low, his hackles raised. I looked Karen dead in the eyes. "You're the only one escalating anything." Melissa packed up within the hour. Karen drove off in a cloud of threats and passive-aggressive glares. As the sun dipped behind the ridgeline, I stood on the porch with Ranger beside me. My cabin was mine again, but it wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, I found a bright orange paper nailed to the pine tree outside my porch. "Notice of code violation, unpermitted structure." I tore it down. It was stamped with the Silver Pines HOA logo, though they had no legal authority over my land. At least, not according to the court ruling I'd shoved in Karen's face the day before. An hour later, another notice arrived. This one slid under my door. "Animal violation. Unauthorized pet on premises." I looked at Ranger, who tilted his head like even he knew it was a joke. They were poking the bear, and I knew exactly which one had the stick. Karen Whitmore didn't just take defeat poorly, she rewrote it. The court had ruled my cabin was exempt from HOA authority. But Karen had always treated laws like speed bumps, something to roll over if she didn't like where they slowed her down. I spent the day checking the property for more sabotage. My security cameras were offline, wires clipped. The motion light above the tool shed had been unscrewed. Ranger kept sniffing around the back door like someone had recently been there. Then came the knock. It was soft, too polite to be neighborly, too calculated to be casual. I opened the door to find a man in a neatly pressed blazer, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Granger, he asked. Yes, Eric Baines, Silver Pines Property Compliance. I'm here to inspect your foundation. Foundation. He gestured to the clipboard. Your residence was flagged for structural irregularities. HOA protocol requires a safety inspection. This land isn't part of your HOA. I cut in. You're trespassing. He shifted uncomfortably. The HOA has recently amended its jurisdiction map. This property was included under clause. Nina, as of last quarter. I stared at him. So, you changed the map? Yes. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Let me make this real simple, Eric. Step off my porch. Go back to Karen. And tell her I'm not buying into her fantasy. He hesitated, then backed away slowly, muttering something about just doing his job. But his visit wasn't just a bluff. It was a test. That evening I visited the county records office in town. Karen had filed new documents, bogus ones. The land had reverted to HOA control due to abandonment. She listed Melissa the squatter as a legal tenant, even fabricated a forged lease that it was all fake. But it looked official, and that's when the bigger picture snapped into place. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about revenue. Karen had been illegally leasing my cabin while I was overseas, charging rent, pocketing cash, using HOA authority to launder it as legitimate community housing. Melissa was just one of probably many. I spent the next few days doing what I did best, digging and documenting. Karen had created a shell program within the HOA called Silverstay, a short-term rental initiative. But it wasn't sanctioned by any real board. She was the board, the treasurer, the leasing agent, the notary, all forged. I found another listing online. My cabin. Photos taken inside. My late grandfather's war medal gone. My bookshelves, my rugs, my kitchen scrubbed, and staged for a woodsy luxury escape. That's when something inside me hardened. This wasn't just a violation. It was desecration. The cabin wasn't just mine. It was the last piece of my grandfather, a man who raised me when no one else would, a war hero who built this place with his bare hands. Karen didn't just break rules. She broke sacred ground, but she'd made one critical error. She forgot who she was stealing from. I wasn't some absentee city slicker. I was back. I was home. And I wasn't scared. The next day I called a lawyer, a real one. Then I called someone else, a friend from my army unit. He worked federal real estate crimes now. Said he'd be interested to take a look. Before hanging up, he asked, "You got documentation?" "Oh," I said, glancing at my growing folder of printed leases, fake notices, and screen captures. "I've got more than documentation. I had ammunition. The legal kind. As the sun dipped behind the trees. I sat on the porch, flipping through the papers like a general planning an ambush. Ranger rested at my feet, ears twitching at every sound from the woods. Karen had launched a quiet war. She just didn't know I'd come prepared to fight back. The air grew colder in Silver Pines, but not because of the weather. Something had shifted, and I could feel it in every stiff wave from neighbors, every glance that lingered too long, and every mailbox that suddenly failed to deliver my mail. Karen was tightening her grip, but she wasn't coming at me directly anymore. That failed. Now she was waging a subtler war, paranoia, pressure, and paperwork. 3 days after I exposed her fake rental scam, I came home to find the locks changed. My own cabin, my own keys wasted. Taped to the door was a notice from the Silver Pines Emergency Board, a group that didn't exist until Karen fabricated it. "This property has been temporarily seized for public safety review due to suspected structural instability." Ranger barked and clawed at the door, sensing my tension. I stood there in silence, the paper fluttering in the breeze, until something inside me snapped. I picked up a rock, shattered the nearest window, and climbed in. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I'd roll in the mud. Inside, I found my camera system completely dismantled, wires yanked, hard drive missing. My file drawer was rifled through, papers tossed like confetti. A few of my late grandfather's tools were gone. His watch, his service flag. I gritted my teeth. This wasn't vandalism, it was violation. The next morning I filed a police report. The deputy, same one who responded to the squatter incident, grimly. "Not the first complaint we've had about Whitmore," he said, scribbling in his notebook. "Trouble is, most folks just back off. She's got friends in the county office, knows the right people to slow things down." "I don't need things slowed," I replied. "I need them exposed." I handed him a copy of the forged lease Karen had issued to Melissa. Then I showed him the listings online, ads renting out my property under the HOA banner, and the court ruling exempting my land from Silver Pines jurisdiction. He scanned it all. "Looks legit," he said. "You got more?" "Oh," I said with a half smile. "I've got a war chest." But even with law enforcement alerted, Karen didn't back down. 2 nights later, my generator was tampered with. Then the water line. Then my propane tank disappeared. Not stolen, removed. The cap and valve left perfectly sealed like a surgical extraction. She was trying to make the cabin unlivable, but I'd been through worse. I'd spent nights in bombed-out shelters. I wasn't about to run just because a power-hungry suburban tyrant had a clipboard and too much free time. I bunkered down, set up new security cams offline, wireless, hidden. I kept copies of every notice, every threat, every false citation. I emailed myself timestamps, backed up files to 3 cloud servers. This wasn't a property dispute anymore, it was a paper trail war, and Karen didn't know it. But I had allies of my own. I called Greg Simmons, an army buddy turned investigator for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This sounds bigger than HOA nonsense, Greg said after I laid it out. If she's forging leases and rerouting rental income, that's wire fraud, tax evasion, maybe racketeering if it's systematic. It is, I said. I've talked to 2 other cabin owners, same exact setup. Karen told them their deeds were outdated, pressured them into temporary oversight agreements, then started renting their places on the HOA's behalf. Send me everything, Greg said. I'll put it in front of someone. By week's end I had over 100 pages of documentation, lease forms, HOA notices, altered maps, screenshots of rental listings, photos of altered locks, audio from a neighbor who caught Karen instructing her assistant to reclaim unregistered lots. Every piece painted the same picture. Karen was running a shadow operation, a real estate racket disguised as neighborhood enforcement. The HOA wasn't her job, it was her cover, and I'd enough to tear the whole house of cards down. The final straw came on a rainy Thursday night. I'd caught 2 men in windbreakers snooping near my toolshed. Not neighbors, not workers, just 2 guys. In the dark with gloves and flashlights, I stepped outside with Ranger at my side and my phone already recording. Evening. Gentlemen, I said. Lose something. They froze. One bolted into the trees. The other muttered something about routine HOA maintenance and stumbled after him. I smiled to myself. Game on. Karen had thrown everything she had at me. Manipulation, intimidation, silence. Now it was my turn. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to dismantle her little empire brick by brick, lie by lie. Sunrise bled through the trees like a slow-burning fuse. By the time the first black SUV pulled up the gravel road, I was already on the porch, coffee in hand, Ranger at my feet. The second and third vehicles rolled in behind it. No HOA logos. This time, these weren't Karen's people, they were mine. Greg Simmons stepped out of the lead vehicle wearing a dark gray jacket with the seal of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development stitched across the chest. He met me at the steps. You were right, he said, flipping open a folder. Lease fraud, false filings, wire transfers to unregistered HOA accounts, property encroachment. This isn't just shady, it's federal. A 4th vehicle pulled up, this one bearing the emblem of the county sheriff's department. The same deputy from before stepped out, nodding to me with quiet satisfaction. Ready to pay Karen a visit? He asked. I've been ready for months. The convoy rolled into Silver Pines like a silent storm. No sirens, no shouting, just black boots on wet pavement and clipped radio commands. Karen's HOA office sat at the end of a perfectly paved cul-de-sac, white shutters gleaming like armor, but her fortress couldn't protect her from the truth. She stepped outside when she saw the cars, clearly expecting another confrontation she could spin to her advantage. What she didn't expect was the badge Greg flashed, or the warrant. What is this? She hissed, voice rising as neighbors gathered behind fences. You can't just storm into a private HOA office. This office was used to commit federal crimes, Greg replied calmly. We have evidence of forged rental contracts, misuse of HOA funds, and impersonation of public officials. You're making a mistake, she snapped. I've done nothing wrong. The community asked for leadership. You gave them a dictatorship. I cut in, stepping forward. She went rigid when she saw me. This is your doing, isn't it? She spat. You've been undermining me since the day you got back? No, I said. You did that to yourself the day you broke into my cabin and sold it out like it was a vacation rental. The deputies moved past her into the building. Boxes of documents were removed. Computers seized. One officer wheeled out a safe labeled board dues. I could see her knees wobble. Neighbors started gathering quiet at first, murmuring, but then someone stepped forward. Mr. Benson, an older man with a limp and a long memory. She tried to evict me last year, he said. Told me my permit was expired even though I showed her the renewal. Another voice joined. Then another doubled my dues when I refused to repaint my mailbox. She told me I couldn't fly the flag on Sundays. She'll fine me for parking in my own driveway. One by one the voices rose. What Karen had built wasn't a community, it was a kingdom of fear. And now it was collapsing. Greg turned to me later, after Karen had been handcuffed and driven away in the back of a cruiser. She's looking at serious time. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement. And with her refusing a plea deal, it's going to court. I exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting from my shoulders. What happens to the HOA? I asked. Temporary board will be appointed, with county oversight, Greg said. But with what you've dug up, most of these residents will vote to dissolve it. Good, let it crumble. Back at my cabin, I found the air smelled sweeter, or maybe I just could breathe again. Ranger lay stretched out on the porch, tongue lolling, his eyes scanning the woods, calm, watchful. Just like always, I hung a new sign on the gate. Karen once tore down private property, not HOA affiliated. Trespass at your own risk. Below it, I added a smaller plaque. In memory of Robert Granger, U.S. Army, master craftsman, and builder of this cabin minus 1972. As the sun dipped behind the tree line, I took a final look at the ridge where silver pines glowed like plastic. From this distance it looked peaceful, harmless, but I knew what lay beneath those manicured lawn secrets. Silence and the kind of power that preys on quiet people. Well, not anymore. Karen built her power on fear and fake rules. I tore it down with truth, and I did it the way my grandfather taught me, brick by brick, with my boots on the ground.